Hey everybody, welcome. I'm so glad that you took some time out of your Tuesday to come visit with me. I've been traveling a lot the past couple of weeks and it's been super exciting. The last thing I went to was a Remedy event, which is a plant-based conference, and it was amazing. The food was so good. I got to do a fun cooking demo. Everyone was friendly, so if you're interested at all in the plant-based style of life, keep an eye out for next year's Remedy, and I'll be talking more about it. Also today, what I thought we would talk about is spices, because one of the things I found myself talking about with a lot of people at Remedy was how easy it is to really make something that's a basic food taste really delicious. And I really believe that spices and herbs are a big part of that. So we'll talk a little bit about what goes in a spice blend. We're going to do 2 spice blends today. We're going to do a poultry seasoning, or I prefer to think of it as a Thanksgiving seasoning because it has nothing to do with poultry. It has no poultry in it. So if you're vegan, don't worry. Then we're going to make one of my most used all year round spice blends, which is my Cajun spice blend. It's very easy to make. It's great to dress up potatoes. You can, so I use it on potatoes in the air fryer. I use it in beans, especially our soup stews, anything that you want to give a punch without having to measure out a bunch of things. So first we'll talk a little bit about the poultry seasoning. So basically poultry seasoning smells a lot like stuffing, or what you're familiar with stuffing. And so it's going to have sage, and there are 2 kinds of sages we'll talk about. And I know you can't see these very well, but there's rubbed sage and ground sage, and you should be able to tell the difference. See how one looks real leafy? That's on this side. And the other one is ground to a powder. You can use either one, but I find the one that's a powder, especially if you're going to do a blend or put it in a soup, it dissolves better, and it kind of carries its taste a little bit further. So what we're going to do is about 2 tablespoons. And if you don't have that much sage, you can actually go ahead and go with cat hair. You always have cat hair here. And so basically I'm going to put about that much, which is about 2 tablespoons. I'm going to put these recipes up in my private Facebook group, Wrong. I'm going to put it in my private Facebook group called Vegan Cooking with Kathy Hester. Has nothing to do with slow cooking except when you ask questions. So sage, and rub sage, if you've ever grown sage leaves, you dry them and literally you rub them with your hand, and that's what gives them this consistency. And there's nothing wrong with it, but there are going to be some stems and some things that can poke you, which I avoid whenever possible. So then we're going to put in some thyme. I don't use ground thyme. I just go ahead and use regular dry thyme because it's just not prickly. It looks like it would be prickly like rosemary, but it's not. Don't ask me why. And since my hand fits better than that spoon in this jar. So we're going to put 2 tablespoons of that. And then we're going to put 1 tablespoon of marjoram. If you don't have marjoram, you can use oregano. There's a difference between oregano and marjoram. And if you smell them, and I would encourage you to do this if you have both, because this is the best way to get the difference. And this one smells more delicate, slightly floral, though it still has kind of the same base notes. There's also Mexican oregano that tastes a little bit different, but you know, in a pinch, use what you have. So I'm going to use these marjoram leaves, and I love marjoram, and I use it a lot. So we're going to use about 1 tablespoon of marjoram. Okay. And as you can tell too, right, some of these are in their own jars. I'm not real brand specific, right? There's all different kinds of jars here. And I usually buy my spices where they're either most accessible. So if I'm at Penzeys in Raleigh, I'll go ahead and grab some there. You can get larger bags, like this rosemary. And you can also get spices cheap online in bulk if you know what you want to get at myspicesage.com or savoryspice.com. There may also be a savory spice store local to you, and that's another great place to get that. So another thing we're going to put in our blend is celery seed. And again, I have two kinds of celery seed. I don't know if you'll be able to make this out on the camera. But this one is a powder, and these are teeny, 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 tiny little seeds. And you can use either one. Again, since I want this to be a little powdery, I'm going to use the ground. Another thing you can do if you don't have any ground spices is you can mix these all together and put it either in a spice grinder or coffee mill, but your coffee will taste like that spice, so do that sparingly. Maybe in a mini food processor, that sometimes works. And you can even get a mortar and pestle where you can just kind of grind them down together if you want. And I'm going to do a little bit, let's say about a half a teaspoon of the celery seed ground. So far we've got sage, marjoram, celery seed, thyme, and I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of rosemary. And I didn't bring my other rosemary out, but this is a powdered rosemary. And I would really encourage you to get powdered rosemary and try it out. I like using fresh rosemary, but I find that the dry little leaves of the rosemary, they're really pokey. They impart some flavor, but then you still have that kind of weird leftover thing to crunch on. And I don't think that that's very happy. So ground rosemary, you're going to use a lot less than you would because it's a more concentrated flavor. So I'm going to put about a 1/4 teaspoon of ground rosemary in this now. If you were using regular rosemary, I'd say to use at least a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half. And probably your next question is, how would I know if I need a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half? Well, you're going to use your nose. So even here, right, I'm just going to be mixing this up by hand, or you could be putting it in a small food processor, completely up to you. So as soon as I finish kind of getting this all together, it's really important to kind of smell your spice blends because that's really going to tell you a lot about what it's going to do to your food. Because what we smell, we usually taste, right? And see, it doesn't look as exciting as it is. And that's the way spice blends are. And what I'd say by smelling mine is I don't think that sage is very strong that I have. So I think it must be a little bit older. So I'm going to add a little more ground sage to this so that it can kind of get that really good stuffing punch. And I'm probably putting 1.5 to 2 teaspoons in. And then I'm also going to put some more rosemary powder because it smells like I want more rosemary. And rosemary really gives you that kind of, I don't know, almost like green tree kind of life, especially to some fall foods, and I really love it. So I'm going to go ahead and risk it and put in a whole 1/4 teaspoon for that. And if I don't mix it up, then I'm just going to smell the 2 spices I put in. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And all you'll need to do is put this in a sealed container. You could use a Ziploc bag. You could use a small Pyrex container. You could use one of those little jelly jars. Those work great. And they stack up so well in your cabinet. Yeah, that tastes more like I want it. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't put any salt in this. You can put salt in this if you want to. You can also put pepper in it. Pepper is another thing. Since I usually salt and pepper near the end, I don't tend to put it in most of my blends like this. So for me, except for whatever that is, must have been something that was on the counter. It's gone now. This is the perfect blend. So what you're going to use this for, So stuffing, if you're making your own stuffing with dried bread, that's going to have no seasoning. If you're used to going and getting like pre-made or pre-dried stuffing, bread crumbs or things like that, especially with stuffing, you want to look at the ingredients because a lot of times they sneak in chicken broth or chicken fat. There are plenty that are labeled vegan, and you're welcome to use those. However, if you want to try and make your own, now you have a spice to do that. This can also be good to rub on some seitan or put in gravy if you're going to have plain seitan or maybe some plain tofu or tempeh. This would kind of give it that oomph that you're really looking for. It's also, would be good, would be pretty good even if you wanted to make some kind of sweet potatoes, maybe with a little bit of cranberries. You could roast them and then maybe cut some cranberries in half and put them in for a little bit longer after that. If you guys have some questions, please feel free to ask. I can see the comments, which is why I keep looking over to the side. So this is our poultry spice. And like I said, our holiday spice. And one of the things I like too, in addition to the inexpensive, super stackable little jelly jars, I find a lot of these pottery containers with lids that are pretty small at the thrift store. And one thing you could do with these spice blends, or any spice blend, is it makes a great inexpensive holiday gift as well. So if you could find something like this for $1, make a big batch of that, then you have something really beautiful and heartfelt that you can give as a gift. So that's another reason to do some spice blends, in my opinion. So is there, okay. Oh, awesome. Rob mentioned that Trader Joe's has a very good stuffing flavored potato chip, which obviously I have to try now. This blend certainly could be used to flavor popcorn or potato chips, and I didn't even think of that, so that's a brilliant idea. So Rob gets totes credit for that one. Any other questions about poultry spices or the blend that I just made? Nope, not quite yet. Okay, so what we just made was a poultry spice blend that I'm calling a holiday blend. And we are also, I also wanted to mention to you that I am going to be doing a vegan Thanksgiving cooking class, either Monday or Tuesday of next week. If you're interested in joining that, it will be on a separate Facebook group, and it will cost $45, and it'll be an 2-hour or above class, so it's going to be fairly extensive so that you can have a whole meal and know how to cook a whole meal after that. If you can't attend the class live, you can watch it as much as you want after. And I'll be looking for some questions for a few days after so that your Thanksgiving can be easy. So again, you can see that on my private Facebook group, Vegan Cooking with Kathy Hester. Okay, now on to the Cajun seasoning blend, and there are a lot of ingredients, so I have to look at the recipe over here. So I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of paprika. And you guys may know that that never works. This is why I use my hand to measure so much. So about 2 teaspoons. And you know, as long as you have the proportion right, it doesn't really matter. If you want to make half as much or more, you could still kind of, hi Jeanette, thanks so much for joining. It's good to have you again here. And then we're going to do some more thyme, right? We're going to do about the same, about 2 teaspoons of thyme. And this, what happens, especially if you cut up some breakfast potatoes, toss them with a little oil or aquafaba, and then this will attach to them. And I don't use any salt when I do that. Jeanette, you'll be able to watch the holiday seasoning making again as soon as I get off, so you'll be able to watch it, so don't worry. So if any of you are coming in right now, you will be able to watch the whole thing. And I'm going to be putting the 2 recipes up in my group, Vegan Cooking with Kathy Hester. So for the Cajun spice, we've got paprika, we've got thyme. You can use oregano or marjoram. And today, I'm going to use oregano because I feel like it. No other reason. And then we're going to put some garlic and some onion powder. And to me, garlic powder and onion powder are just, they really need to be in your cabinet. There's nothing unhealthy about using them. So some people think, oh, it's granulated, therefore something crazy happened. Well, it was dehydrated. It was a whole onion slice, dehydrated, and then ground from being dehydrated. So it has nothing bad in there. There should be no other ingredient other than onion or garlic when you read the label. And you can get organic ones. And I find that at Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, these are usually inexpensive just about anywhere. Whereas we'll talk a little more about some specialty seasonings. So I'm going to use about a ½ teaspoon of onion powder, which I could actually measure out. And then we're going to do about a teaspoon of garlic powder, because that's how I roll. And you know what? If you go, I hate garlic, I'll never eat oregano or something like that, you can leave it out. Make it your blend. And that's the whole beauty about making spice blends. They're much cheaper than buying them in the store, and they're exactly the way you want them. So we're going to put in some cayenne pepper. And again, you could use chipotle pepper. You could even use smoked paprika if you wanted to give it a little different feel. I usually make mine kind of mild because Cheryl's kind of a spice wuss. Oh, great. So cayenne pepper, then we're going to put some black pepper in here because it does need, the Cajun seasoning does need a little bit of bite. Even if you choose not to make it super spicy, you might want to add maybe double the pepper, black pepper, if you're leaving out the cayenne pepper. And then the weird things that you're not expecting, a little bit of allspice. And how many of you use allspice already? Anybody? Cheryl just joined right after I said that she was a spice wuss. So I wanted to make sure that full disclosure. Okay, allspice is named allspice because it tastes kind of like all the dessert spices. And you can smell a little bit of like cinnamon, cloves. It's just an amazing flavor. And actually allspice is a berry. And so it's a berry that's ground. And it's wonderful. If you can only afford to have one dessert spice, you can't have cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, and this, I would get allspice because allspice can pretty much take care of you. So we're going to put a little bit of that because there's actually kind of a little bit of sweetness in a Cajun spice as well. It kind of comes, or aromatic sweetness, something that you're not expecting. Yeah, allspice is the best. Now these are cloves, and you want to be really careful with cloves, ground cloves when you're using them, because they can overpower things so quickly. So think of them in your head like as if they were a pepper, and that maybe you would take a little bit at a time. I know that 1/8 of a teaspoon is what I'm going to use for this whole batch. So that's on a 1/4 teaspoon, and that's about what it looks like, which is not very much, right? And so that's everything that I'm putting in the Cajun spice blend this time. I have a few different versions, and sometimes I will also put bay leaf powder in it, and that's pretty awesome. I couldn't find my bay leaf powder this morning. So if I don't have bay leaf powder, I tend to leave it out because even your food processor really doesn't want to grind up bay leaves. They're really hard. But you can buy them, again, in some of the places that I said before, myspicesage.com, Savory Spice Shop, which you can get online, or perhaps there's one local to you. And let's see. Yeah, and so to me, this smells right. And how will you know if yours smells right? It's going to smell good to you. And it's not going to smell like it's going to smell like something you want to eat and you want to taste. And you can taste it right now. The beauty of this powder is I find that it really opens up and gets more flavor as it gets some heat on it. So when you do it with the potatoes, it's amazing. And Jeanette, did you make some along with us? Jeanette said it smells nice, so maybe she made some along. And again, you could make this into a powder just by putting it into your food processor. You could get, oh, I think I inhaled some cayenne pepper there, and that was exciting. So that should perk me up. So we're going to talk about a couple other places that you can get spices. Like actually Rob, who's on the call or the video right now, he works at Cisco. So you can get big, giant things of herbs like this. They may or may not be as fresh as some other places. Things like celery seed, marjoram. If you're not so sure you're going to use them a whole lot, go to your local Whole Foods or Co-op where you can actually just get a tablespoon or two. And that way you don't have to invest a lot of money to start out. Okay. So another favorite place to go is the Indian market. The Indian market's amazing. So I know someone was talking about coriander or cardamom costing a lot. This is like almost half a pound of coriander for $2.29. So I mean, it's amazing. This is kind of one of my, I have two backup spice things like this. So they have smaller ones, but if you know you're going to use almost a pound of cumin in the next 2 years, you could get this, because cumin, kind of like some of the other spices we were talking about, really activates with heat. So as you heat it, it's going to bring back that beautiful smell. So this 14-ounce bag was $4.49. And that's less than some tiny jars that you'll find at the supermarket. And Jeanette has a co-op she belongs to and likes the Yes Market. Jeanette, where is the Yes Market? There's also a lady at our farmer's market that sells fresh herbs. So that's pretty good. Another place, and it's also inexpensive for most spices as well as all the chiles, is a Hispanic market. They usually have a place where they're little packets, and they tend to be much cheaper. Well, actually, everything tends to be much cheaper than buying a spice in your regular grocery store. They are sometimes marked up 1,000%. So if you go in, what do I recommend using the Cajun blend on? Everything. Sometimes I'll coat tofu in it, and I'll put it in the air fryer. I will put some aquafaba oil on some potatoes, and then I'll coat them in the frying mix, and then depending on what size I've cubed them, I'll probably cook them at 350 or 330 for about 20 minutes till they start to soften, and then finish them off for 3 to 5 minutes on a high heat to crisp them up at 390. Oh, and Yes Market is in Hyattsville, Maryland. I'm going to go. I want to see what's there. So, but don't be afraid to go into your local ethnic stores, and they will help you. I find that people are just so nice and glad that you want to learn about cooking in their cultures, and because I'm always just dying to learn another Indian recipe or another Mexican dish, or learn about a new chili I never saw before. You know, how can I use this? And you can find out so much information. So don't be afraid for that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, if you're looking for something, a gift for the holidays for someone who's just starting to go vegan or who's just starting to cook, the Easy Vegan Cookbook is really good. It requires no special appliances. There's some super easy things there. There's even a holiday casserole, which is basically like chickpeas and veggies under a crust of cranberry stuffing. And so that's kind of fun for you to do too. And so I feel like this book is real empowering for people who are just learning how to cook, because you can make some pretty fancy things with not many steps and not a whole lot of effort. So I think that it is pretty easy. Some things aren't, you know, you start it and you finish it 15 minutes later, but I think you'll find a lot of good stuff in there. Almost all of my cookbooks have some spice blends in them. So if you already have a cookbook, maybe go and look and see what spice blends you can make. A, for holiday presents, B, for yourself. And let me know if you have any questions. And if you have a spice blend that you're interested in or that you've always used, and maybe we'll do another one. I'm hoping that we will cook for real next week at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, but we'll see if I find my induction burner or not. It's a very exciting mystery. So anyhow, thank you guys so much for joining in. Ask your questions. The video will be posted up in just a few minutes so you can watch it again. Okay, have a great week.